On a stormy night, Peter Van Garrett is driving his carriage through the fields when a mysterious gallop follows him. He hears a cutting sound and looks out the window only to see his driver decapitated. He jumps from the carriage and runs across the field. He stops and sees a scarecrow and hears something approaching him. When he turns, a scythe comes down and cuts off his head. In 1799 in New York City, the policeman Ichabod Crane finds a floating body in the river. They take the body to the prison to burn, despite Ichabod's protest that the man's death should be properly investigated. Ichabod's rigid belief in science and his relentless pursuit of justice are strongly disapproved of among his peers, and he is soon sent to a small town called Sleepy Hollow to investigate a series of murders. As he travels to his new assignment, he reflects on his scarred hands and thinks about what the town has in store for him. When Ichabod arrives, he notices the fear and paranoia in the town. He approaches a large house and ignores a couple kissing in the shadows outside. He accidentally interrupts a party game while searching for the head of the household and receives a kiss from the daughter, Katrina Van Tassel, and meets her hostile suitor, Brom Van Brunt. Ichabod introduces himself to Katrina's father, the wealthy businessman Baltus Van Tassel, and meets his second wife, Mary Preston, now known as Lady Van Tassel. The Van Tassels allow Ichabod to stay with them for the remainder of his time in Sleepy Hollow. While unpacking his luggage in his room, a maid named Sarah tells him how grateful she is for a policeman's arrival. He is invited by Van Tassel to his private office and meets the town elders, the local doctor, Dr. Thomas Lancaster, Reverend Steenwyck, the magistrate, Samuel Phillips, and the notary, James Hardenbrook. Ichabod presents the details of the case. 3 people have been murdered: Peter Van Garrett, his son, Dirk Van Garrett, and the widow Winship. All 3 have been found decapitated. The town elders inform Ichabod that the heads of the bodies have never been recovered. They believe they were taken by the Headless Horseman. The Horseman was a Hessian mercenary from the Revolutionary War who loved carnage and rode a huge black stallion named Daredevil. He sharpened his teeth to add ferocity to his appearance and galloped on his horse into battle, decapitating his enemies. The Hessian met his end until one winter in 1779, when his stallion was shot near the western woods, just outside Sleepy Hollow. Soldiers pursue him through the forest where he finds 2 little girls collecting firewood. One of the girls makes a noise that alerts the soldiers to his location. The girl stays while her sister runs. She watches the soldiers fight the Hessian and, eventually, decapitate him with his own sword. They buried him in an unmarked grave deep in the forest, and for 20 years, his spirits have haunted the place since. The town elders believe the Horseman is beheading any head he sees in sight. Ichabod is skeptical, and they hand him a Bible to read. He notes that there is a family tree of the Van Garretts and Van Tassels inside the book. Later that night, one of Van Garrett's servants, Jonathan Masbath, watches the edge of the town against the Horseman. As he aims his gun at the fog, he sees something sinister. A shot is fired, a hoarse noise, and seconds later, Jonathan is running through the woods from the Headless Horseman. The Hessian quickly catches up to him, and his sword cleanly chops off Jonathan's head in one swift blow. The next morning, Ichabod sees Mr. Killian, who lends him a horse named Gunpowder. He also meets Mr. Killian's family, his wife, who serves as a midwife, Beth, and his son Thomas. At that moment, the locals fire a gun to alert the residents about another murder. Ichabod arrives at the crime scene and sees that the town elders have already gathered around the body. They inform the officer about the victim, Jonathan Masbath. Ichabod reprimands them for moving the body and raises the question of why the Hessian takes the heads with him if the body is easily identifiable. Usually, the heads are taken so that the body cannot be identified. He continues to investigate the scene and draws his own scientific counter-evidences, noting that the wound was cauterized immediately, which means the flame must have been burning brightly. The town elders tremble at this grim idea. Later that day, the town holds a funeral for Jonathan. Ichabod takes the young orphan Masbath under his protection and service. As the others leave, Magistrate Phillips approaches Ichabod and tells him that Jonathan was the 5th victim, not the 4th. There are 5 victims buried in 4 graves. Suddenly, Ichabod has an idea and orders Masbath to wake him before dawn. When morning comes, Ichabod, along with Masbath, exhumes all 4 bodies. When investigating the body of the widow Winship, he notices an incision in her stomach. He takes the body to the town doctor's office and inspects it. He raises the question of why the Horseman would cut off her head and also stab the widow in the stomach. Ichabod bids them farewell while investigating further. Hours later, a bloodied Ichabod exits the room and announces to the town elders that the widow Winship was pregnant at the time she was murdered. Night falls, and Ichabod crosses the town bridge with his horse, Gunpowder. He hears a sound and sees the Headless Horseman at the end of the bridge. He runs from the Hessian into the woods. He stops and looks around, and the Horseman throws a lit pumpkin head at him. Unknowingly, the Hessian was a fake, as it was just Brom dressed as the Horseman, playing a cruel prank on him. That night, Ichabod dreams of his mother. He remembers her drawing circles by the fireplace and putting him to bed with his favorite red paper cardinal toy. He also remembers a horrible man lurking in the shadows. When Ichabod wakes, he descends the stairs to get a glass of water. He hears a sound and finds Katrina reading by the fire. He discovers from Katrina that his own mother died 2 years ago and that the woman who breastfed her is now his stepmother, Mary Preston, now Lady Van Tassel. He asks her why no one mentioned that the Van Tassels are related to the Van Garretts. Katrina says it's because everyone in Sleepy Hollow is related to each other, either by blood or marriage. She then tells how her father came to this place as a poor man. Van Garrett housed him in a dilapidated cottage and an acre. Her father worked hard, prospered, and gave her the life she has today. Katrina then gives him a spell book to protect him before taking him to the old cottage where they used to live. When they arrive, Katrina notices the scars on Ichabod's hands. She takes him to the old fireplace and begins drawing in the ashes. He is impressed to see that it is the same symbol as the one his mother drew in his dreams. She then shows him the sculpture of an archer deep in the fireplace, saying that the sculpture was already there before they moved in. Ichabod then shows her his red paper cardinal toy. Separate images that become one once you spin them fast enough. Later that night, Ichabod hears the town elders holding a secret meeting. It seems Magistrate Phillips had packed his belongings and was about to leave the town. He follows the magistrate and confronts him in the fields. Ichabod confronts him about the widow Winship and her child. It turns out the widow sought his help to protect her child's rights, and so he was bound by oath to keep this secret. Phillips knows who the child's father is and reassures him that it was the Horseman who killed her. Feeling frustrated, Ichabod denies the existence of the Horseman. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted by the noise of goats. Phillips gasps as he sees the shadow of the Hessian galloping towards them. The magistrate tries to flee, but the Horseman catches him and cuts off his head. Ichabod falls to the ground as Phillips's head rolls towards him. The Hessian runs towards him and takes the head with his sword, just before Ichabod faints. When Ichabod wakes, Van Tassel, Katrina, and young Masbath visit him. He is hysterical, telling them that the Horseman truly exists before fainting again. He dreams again of his mother, and this time they are playing in the woods while it snows. The dream quickly turns dark as a young Ichabod witnesses his mother being mistreated by the horrible man. Ichabod wakes up and announces to the town elders that he will go into the forest today to search for the Horseman's grave. He ends up going only with young Masbath. He discovers that Masbath's father worked for the Van Garretts, and that a particular thing happened a week before the Van Garretts' murders. An argument erupted between father and son, and then Masbath's father was called by Mr. Van Garrett. They continue their journey through the forest and stop near a trail that leads to a cave. As they approach, they hear a woman's voice, and Ichabod draws his weapon. They slowly enter the cave and see a veiled woman there. Ichabod quickly realizes that she is a witch. The witch takes Ichabod with her and orders Masbath to go outside. She lets him sit at her table as she binds herself with chains and prepares a ritual. He asks about the Horseman and if there is any way to stop him. The witch tells him to shut up, and the room falls silent. Suddenly, the witch lunges at him with her eyes and tongue protruding from her face. In a hoarse voice, she commands him to follow the Native American trail to where the sun dies, where they will find the Tree of the Dead and descend to the resting place of the Horseman. Ichabod breaks free from the witch's grasp and escapes with Masbath. They take their horses to search for the Tree of the Dead. They soon stop in their tracks, and Ichabod jumps off his horse with his weapon to hunt a shadow. He spots a white horse and its rider, Katrina, who has followed them into the forest. Their conversation is then interrupted by Masbath, who leads them to a gigantic tree and returns them to the middle of the forest. They finally find the Tree of the Dead. Ichabod begins to cut the roots and finds them filled with blood. He continues to cut until the roots open up, revealing a hideout filled with severed heads. Ichabod concludes that the tree must be the portal between two worlds. He climbs the tree and begins to dig into the mound. He finds the skeleton of the Hessian, but the skull is missing. He tells them that this must be the reason the Horseman keeps taking heads. He will not stop until his own head is returned to him. Suddenly, a rumble comes from the mound of severed heads. Ichabod, Katrina, and Masbath look on in terror as the mound of heads opens up, and out comes the huge stallion, Daredevil, and its rider, the Headless Horseman. The Hessian gallops away in search of his next victim, and Ichabod quickly follows him. The Horseman arrives at the Killian's house and quickly eliminates Mr. Killian. Beth manages to hide Thomas in the basement and hides in a corner of the room as the killer enters with her husband's head. She is also decapitated, and the Horseman shows no mercy even for little Thomas. Meanwhile, Brom, who was on night watch, hears the screams. He sees the Horseman and fires at him, knocking him off his horse. The headless body advances toward him as he reloads his weapon, but Brom manages to retaliate. The Hessian throws a knife into Brom's knee, impairing his abilities. Ichabod arrives and tries to help his friend. He stabs the Horseman in the back as they flee across the bridge. When they turn to look for the enemy, the Horseman surprises them from behind and stabs Ichabod in the shoulder, then pushes him aside. He then lures Brom to the bridge and fights with him again, landing a few blows before finally cutting his body in half. Ichabod looks up as he sees the Headless Horseman moving away before fainting again. Back at the Van Tassel house, Dr. Lancaster inspects Ichabod's wounds. The doctor is surprised that the wound has healed well and bled very little. When Ichabod wakes up, he immediately apologizes to Katrina for not being able to defend Brom. He then tells them that the Horseman doesn't kill randomly. Someone who is alive must have unearthed the Hessian's skull and is using it to control him to do their bidding. His theory is dismissed as Katrina makes him drink a homemade potion. While Ichabod sleeps, he dreams again of the horrible man, but this time it is the Headless Horseman. He enters a red door into a room full of torture instruments and accidentally hurts his hands on one of the devices before finding his dead mother, with 1,000 holes pierced in her. Ichabod wakes up and runs into Katrina's arms. He reveals to her that his mother was murdered by his father in an attempt to save her damned soul. He was only 7 when he lost her and also lost faith in religion. As Ichabod and Katrina grow closer, they show their vulnerable sides and express their attraction to each other. They soon share an intimate embrace. When Ichabod wakes, he presents the facts of the case to Masbath. He thinks there must be a conspiracy forming among the town elders since they were discussing the night that the magistrate was murdered. Ichabod then concludes he must record all the men and women in Sleepy Hollow, starting with the chief citizen, Lord Van Tassel. Masbath agrees that Van Tassel should be the chief citizen now that the Van Garretts are dead. Suddenly, Ichabod has an idea and takes Masbath with him to see the notary. When they arrive at Hardenbrook's office, Masbath sees his father's bag. They learn from the notary that, since all the Van Garretts are dead, the property will pass to the next in line of inheritance, which are the Van Tassels. At that moment, Masbath reveals a document from his father's bag. It turns out Peter Van Garrett created a new will, leaving his estate to the widow Winship. The two secretly married and left everything to their unborn child. Hardenbrook admits he was involuntarily pulled into the plot. Ichabod concludes that Reverend Steenwyck knew about the marriage because he performed the ceremony. Dr. Lancaster attended to the pregnant woman. Magistrate Phillips gave legal protection, and Notary Hardenbrook concealed the documents. The 4 elders conspired to eliminate the Van Garretts and the widow Winship so that there would no longer be any heirs to claim. Masbath's father was involved in the conspiracy since he was the one who witnessed Van Garrett's new will, ultimately leading to his death. Thus, the only one who will inherit Van Garrett's fortune will be none other than Baltus Van Tassel. Ichabod returns to his room and finds Katrina, who asks about the investigation. He refuses to tell her anything important and puts the will in his drawer. When she leaves, Masbath finds a symbol drawn under Ichabod's bed, telling him it is the evil eye and someone is casting spells against him. Later that night, Ichabod and Masbath follow a hooded figure leaving the house and heading into the woods. Masbath waits for him near a tree while Ichabod moves further away. Hidden among the trees, Ichabod finds Lady Van Tassel making love to Reverend Steenwyck while she cuts a dagger into her hand and wipes it on the man's back. Ichabod and Masbath immediately return to the house and discover that the new will has been stolen. Ichabod mounts his horse and catches up to Katrina while she burns the will to protect her father. The two argue, conflicted about their feelings for each other and their sense of justice, and Katrina says goodbye to him. Ichabod talks to Lady Van Tassel, but Katrina still refuses to speak with him. She confronts him and tells him she knows he saw her last night. She then asks him not to tell her husband. At that moment, Lord Van Tassel enters the kitchen and tells them that Hardenbrook committed suicide. Reverend Stenwyck has called a meeting at the church where everyone will speak against Ichabod. Van Tassel advises him to leave immediately. As the townspeople gather in the church, Van Tassel waits for his wife on his horse while she picks some herbs for her wound. Suddenly, the Headless Horseman appears from behind the trees and cuts off his head. Van Tassel reaches the church and warns Katrina about the Hessian who just killed her stepmother. They run inside the church as the horseman arrives. The headless killer stops because he cannot enter inside a church. People start firing at the Hessian through the windows while a discussion arises among the town elders. Van Tassel draws his gun to defend himself, while Dr. Lancaster begins to confess that the four of them were bewitched and forced to conspire against him. But before he can finish the confession, Reverend Stenwyck strikes him in the head and kills him. Van Tassel then fires his weapon at the Reverend. He recoils and points his gun, threatening everyone to step away. Suddenly the window breaks, and Van Tassel is impaled by the Headless Horseman. Katrina screams as her father is dragged outside the church and has his head cut off. She faints, and Ichabod sees the pink chalk near her palm. It turns out she was the one who drew the symbol under his bed. Ichabod and Masbeth take Katrina back home, but she still hasn't woken up. Ichabod suspects she is responsible for bringing the horseman back to life. He calls for his carriage and prepares to leave. As he passes through the village, he sees the townspeople carrying Lady Van Tassel's body to the morgue. He opens the spell book Katrina gave him and discovers that the symbol she is drawing was not the evil eye, but a protection spell for loved ones against evil spirits. Ichabod knows he needs to set things right and asks the carriage to return to town. Ichabod goes to the morgue and inspects Lady Van Tassel's body. It is exactly as he suspected. The cut on the hand was made when the body was already dead. This body was not Lady Van Tassel. Meanwhile, back at the house, Katrina faints when she sees her stepmother alive and well. Lady Van Tassel takes Katrina to an old windmill, and, unknowingly, Masbeth follows them. She cuts a piece of hair from her stepdaughter and uses it in her spell. It turns out it was Lady Van Tassel all along. She stole the horseman's head and made a pact with the devil to bring the Headless Horseman back to life to do her bidding. She summons the Hessian from the Tree of the Dead one last time to kill Katrina. When Katrina wakes up, Lady Van Tassel reveals her true nature. She killed one of the maids, Sarah, and used her body to disguise her own death. Her real name was not Mary Preston, but Mary Archer. Her family lived in an old cottage and served the Van Garretts for years. When her father died, they were evicted and became outcasts living in the woods because her mother was suspected of witchcraft. After a year, her mother died, and she and her sister were left alone to fend for themselves. While collecting firewood, she witnessed the horseman's death, and at that moment, she offered her soul to the devil to help her bring the Hessian back to life for revenge. She killed the town elders and anyone who knew of her plan, even her own sister, the witch living in the woods. She will kill the Van Garretts, who evicted her family, and take their properties, and she will kill the Van Tassels who stole her cottage. All that remains to do is kill Katrina, and she will have everything she desires. As Lady Van Tassel speaks, Masbeth creeps up behind her with a hammer, but she turns to him and makes him drop the weapon. Katrina and Masbeth flee the mill just in time to meet Ichabod. The horseman pushes them up the mill, and they barricade the doors. They climb to the roof just as the Hessian knocks down the door. He cuts the ladder, but Ichabod and the rest of the group manage to make it to the roof. He throws a gas lamp down the mill, hoping to burn the horseman alive. The three cling to the mill and jump just as they get near the ground. They run just as the mill explodes in a huge fireball, but the Headless Horseman survives. The three mount the carriage, and the chase continues. Katrina takes the reins while Ichabod fires at the horseman. He is knocked down by a tree branch and is left mounted on the devil's stallion. He lunges back onto the carriage and pushes the horseman back onto his own horse. As they are pulled by their own horses, Ichabod returns to the carriage and confronts the horseman. A fight ensues, and the other two jump to the horses as the carriage comes loose. Ichabod grabs the reins as the carriage pulls away and jumps into a ditch along with the Hessian. Ichabod, Katrina, and Masbeth reach the Tree of the Dead and confront Lady Van Tassel, who shoots Ichabod in the chest. She grabs Katrina and orders the Headless Horseman to take her. Ichabod regains consciousness and realizes that the spellbook saved his life. He leaps towards Lady Van Tassel, who releases Katrina. The two tumble to the ground, fighting for the horseman's skull. Meanwhile, Masbeth grabs a branch and knocks out Lady Van Tassel. The horseman grabs Katrina and is about to cut off her head when Ichabod grabs the skull and throws it back to the Hessian. The horseman regains his head, and the contract is broken. He is no longer under the will of the evil stepmother. Ichabod and Katrina embrace, and he shows her how his gift protected him. The Hessian, now with his head, takes Lady Van Tassel in his arms and gives her a bloody kiss. Lady Van Tassel realizes she has lost. She screams as the horseman takes her to the Tree of the Dead and into the depths of hell. The three look at their stepmother's remaining arm as they realize it is finally over, and Ichabod faints again. After a while, Ichabod marries Katrina and takes her, along with Masbeth, to the city of New York, where they will live a new and happy life.